Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss some Ipsos polling in the wake of the riots, but on general concerns about the state of the country with a focus on extremism, because this actually presents an opportunity for Labour to get on the front foot. The headlines from this poll are about how about 3/4 of people are worried about the far right after the riots. But what was a more interesting stat for me is how just over half, 51%, think that the views in the country are so divided that it represents a danger for society. And the poll notes this is an increase of a third compared to last month. Now, of course, the outbreak of the riots has inevitably meant that more people will see the danger to society of extremism, because it was very much on show earlier this month. It's woken a lot of people up. We're also going to be reminded of it as more news ramps up of trials and convictions, because so far what we've seen are the convictions of the low-hanging fruit, the people who are stupid enough to have themselves filmed actually taking part on the front lines of the riots. There must surely come a time when those organising the riots directly have their collars felt. For the record, the survey shows that 73% are concerned about far-right extremism, with 59% being concerned about left-wing extremism. So a majority of the population would be very much behind a government that wanted to tackle this. And because there are so many things we need to do in order to tackle extremism, I'd argue that it's in the government's interest to keep talking about the impact and consequences of the riots in order to deliver a whole range of policies. So whether the media wants to or not, in the next few months, the next year, the next 2 years, go back to talking about the riots, Labour should absolutely keep doing that. For example, before the election, and certainly before the riots kicked off, Keir Starmer talked about the way to deal with populism was to make life better for ordinary people. And although the vast majority of the public condemned the violent terror attacks and riots, a majority still think that their supposed concerns about immigration were valid. Just not that violence was the right way to express those concerns. Labour have the opportunity to say, well, actually, your real concerns are access to housing, good jobs and public services. And actually, most of those people with those concerns will agree with that. If you fix those three problems, you instantly remove all of the arguments against immigration in the minds of most of those people. And Labour, of course, they've explicitly talked about wanting to boost access to housing, to decent jobs and to public services. It's all in the manifesto. So they can now frame these policies in terms of dealing with extremism as well. In fact, it would do Labour and Starmer personally a lot of good to do so, I would argue, because the conversation would begin with the crackdown on riots and incitement to the riots. This is the tough line we're taking against those who inflict violence on our society. But then he can move into because Nigel, Keir Starmer's there with the rod, the iron rod going, oh, you riot, we're going to beat you down, which is what the public want. But then you've got Nigel Farage smoothing their brows going, oh, but you've got these genuine concerns. Keir Starmer can actually say, no, I'm the one who recognises your real concerns. It's housing, it's public services, it's access to decent jobs. And he can then tie that, this is the stick, and then the carrot is we are improving these things for ordinary people who have those genuine concerns but don't feel the need to tear up the high streets to express it. Loosen the grip of extremists on ordinary people. Yvette Cooper, of course, has recently talked about bringing extreme misogyny into the counter-extremism framework, considering types of misogyny as a form of extremism, which is absolutely essential to Labour's plans to halve violence against women in the next 10 years. So there's going to be a lot that Labour are naturally doing in order to tackle extremism that, outside of the purview of the riots, from both a preventative and reactive point of view. So they may as well keep making a song and dance about it and linking it to those riots, which have been a major concern for a lot of people, bundle together as many policies as they can into it. Because the Tory client media and the Tories themselves they've already been doing it, and they're going to attack every Labour policy designed to either improve public services, improve access to housing and improve the quality and pay of jobs. They've been going mental about the pay awards, the public sector pay awards, for example. As if we're giving these people money for nothing. It's like, no, they're doing jobs, mate. If Labour can show people how they have this interconnected strategy for cutting the feet from under the extremists, left or right, doesn't matter what those concerns are, then they can undermine those Tory arguments as well. Because this Ipsos survey still showed that the state of public services is the greatest concern for voters, followed very closely by the economy. But I will point out, because the survey split up extremism into 3 different types, if it just asked about concerns about extremism in general, you may have found that actually that was the number 1 concern. It's standard political wisdom anyway to tie policies to efforts to tackle some great concern of the public, particularly if it's a controversial policy. But in this case, Labour have the opportunity to address a number of major concerns with one package of policies. In fact, you could probably go down the manifesto and for almost every policy in some way link it to one of these massive concerns. I could also note the elephant in the room in this survey is 73% being concerned about the state of democracy in Britain. Oh, that sounds like a case for electoral reform to me, but maybe that's for another discussion. But interesting though, if the government want to engage voters, what better way than being seen to address a major concern? Like if over 2/3 of the public agree that something is a concern, well, there's scope there for a government to connect with the public dealing with it. And here we've got 4 things that over 2/3 have concerns about: public services, the economy, extremism, and the state of democracy. So it follows that Labour should, when discussing absolutely any policy whatsoever, explicitly link it with one or more of these concerns. And in terms of specific blame for the riots, which seem to have, as I say, woken a lot of people up, this Ipsos poll delivered very similar results to other polls. Most people have the greatest praise for the police, which is understandable. They were basically on the front line with missiles being launched at them. They are obviously the people you're going to say, yeah, we've got the most respect for them. But more people think Starmer and Cooper did a good job than bad. That was also reflected in other polls. And they asked about politicians in general. The public did not think that. The public thought that actually, by and large, politicians in general did a bad job rather than good, which is interesting. And you single a couple out, they certainly thought Nigel Farage did a bad job compared to good, and they were none too impressed with Rishi Sunak either, which reflects poorly on the Conservative Party. I mean, I did say, although it was clear that most Conservative MPs wanted Sunak to remain on as interim leader, I did sort of suggest it would have been better for them to have chosen a temporary leader for the duration of the contest than to leave Sunak in place if he really wasn't up for it. I mean, he went on holiday during the riots, for goodness sake. But, you know, and this is very much in line with other polls as well, the biggest criticism of all is for social media companies. Another opportunity for the government. You know, I see that Ofcom are already hiring extra staff in order to deal with social media companies with the new powers in the Online Safety Act, which, remember, mostly are not online yet. Starmer has said that the Act will be reviewed in case there are improvements which need to be made. I strongly suspect they will think improvements need to be made. And in this, they're going to have public support as well. Right now, the focus is on the upcoming budget, which has been billed as something that's going to sound quite harsh. Though I personally think we're going to see plenty of good and bad in it. But once that's out of the way, Labour have the ability to really tie in what they're doing with what are clearly major concerns from the public. It's really a question of political packaging or spin, if you like. I would see a poll like this as an opportunity for Labour to get on the front foot and stay there for a long time, because I think every potentially controversial policy, when I say controversial, I mean the ones that the Daily Telegraph will do its nut at, that Labour could have, arguably can be linked to efforts to tackle one or more of these concerns. Quite a few of them can be linked directly to public services, the economy, and extremism. And like I said at the start, if you've got 51% of the public, because you can have concerns, right? You can have a concern about a thing, but it's like, well, how much of a concern is it? Is it going to change the way you vote? Well, not really, no. But if you've got 51% of the public are so concerned about divisions that it is posing a danger to society, that's a useful indicator of saliency, because it means they think that's serious. It means just over half of the public are worried enough that they will absolutely get behind government efforts to tackle it. Labour just need to recognise this and work on an effective narrative, something they've not always been the best at. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, please join as well. You can click the memberships button. And until next time, I'll see you later.